Welcome to Eye on Education. I'm Ed Lecius, your host, and today we're exploring what it's like to be a student member of the Board of Education here in Nashua. Joining us on today's program is Grace Tomasetti and Cam McIntyre, the two most recent members of the Board of Education representing Nashua High South and Nashua High North. Welcome to Eye on Education. So what possesses a high school student today to want to, and you run for this position, to serve on the Board of Education? Grace?
For me, I was asked. The predecessor to me, Alex Norris, knew that there wasn't a lot of interest in it because the nature of being on the board, it's a significant time commitment to a lot of people my age at least, and you have to actually know the school and be involved, and I felt like I was a good candidate, so I ended up running.
Cam, what about you?
So for me, it was always, as students, you always kind of feel the effects of what a higher level order is kind of doing. So when I first entered the school freshman, sophomore year, you probably know we switched to competency-based grading. And I know a lot of students weren't on board with it, a lot of teachers weren't on board. So I really felt that I needed to be a voice, I needed to speak about these changes in order for the board to hear about what was going on. And additionally too, talking about with experiencing the effects of, I guess you call it legislation, like budget cuts and stuff like that at the Board of Education level. So for example, freshman and sophomore year both, there were significant proposed cuts to athletics. And I think it was last year too, they talked about combining the high schools into a vocational or in an academic school, or cutting teacher staffing positions. And for me, the students always feel the effects of that. And if we're going to be a great school district, then we need to make sure our voices are heard. So,
how seriously do you feel that your opinion was taken by the adults on the board?
I think that the adults, they do listen to you. Honestly, I can say that from my experience that they will listen to students, especially when you try to give a well-reasoned, well-sounded argument, and you're not just kind of complaining about something. If you try to offer solutions, if you try to, express a genuine concern, then they will listen to you.
Grace, do you talk to your fellow students when there's an issue such as the testing or cutting athletics or teachers' positions and get their input and then relay it?
Yeah, there's definitely, once a proposal goes out in the school board, there is some rumblings in the school and everybody sort of talks about it on their own. I know that for me, one of the best places that I sort of got student input was for student voice. We both have it at both North and South, and it's just a place that really anybody can join and you talk about really anything that you want, and it's really great just because you can get the input from so many people, and it isn't like Senate where you have to get voted in. You just show up every Thursday for us during E-Block and you give your voice, and we work on how to fix stuff during the schools. Another place for me was just randomly at lunch. I'd go up and talk to friends of mine or stuff like that. And because of the diversity of our schools, you end up hearing a lot of voices just by merely sitting at your lunch table.
So given the diversity, are the students at North, in your case, are they as engaged in the issues on the day-to-day school functionings as people may not expect?
I feel that depending on how much it impacts you, it'll definitely sort of determine whether or not people are invested in what's going on. I know that the teacher cuts and the athletic cuts and the changes to the grading, like Cam mentioned, those are big things that we know are going to impact us as students, so we take a lot more interest in that. And because of the diversity, we do have differing opinions on stuff, but I feel like, especially in student voice and places like that, where it isn't like you're fighting back and forth, you're just having a nice discourse, we do end up just trying to talk through things, and it's a good place to learn about where other people come from and why they believe how they do.
Cam, there was a lot of debate about the grading method, and how in tune were the students that you were dealing with at South on that issue?
The students were, I would say it was a big issue for a couple years in a row. Oftentimes, sometimes teachers would take like an entire class period to explain how they corrected a test or something like that because we didn't really understand it. We didn't really understand where they were coming from, what they were kind of doing with it. And a lot of students brought these concerns forward to their teachers and to, administration level, and we worked it out eventually, so it ended up being good.
What are some of the other issues that came across your desk while serving in that position, Grace, from the North students?
I'd have to say the proposal of starting school 14 minutes earlier and ending 7 minutes later because of all the snow days. It wasn't the biggest, most important thing, but it was definitely one of the proposals that got a lot of people talking, just because 14 minutes in the beginning of the day is a lot. It may not be a lot to the elementary school kids, but it really is a lot to the high school kids, because 14 minutes is how long it takes to get from my house to North, or how long it takes me to get up and to get ready to go. So it really was a big issue for a lot of people, because tardies really do matter in high school, for sports, for honor societies, for that sort of stuff. So a lot of people were worried if we started school 14 minutes earlier that might be a huge issue for our school.
Yet there had been discussions, Cam, about changing the school hours to have the students go in later versus the schedule, early morning schedules they're on now. Any thoughts on how that would have played had it actually gotten legs and gone forward?
Yeah, so there are two sides to that issue. One of them is, your teenagers, your biological clock, you need to sleep in the morning, because kids are coming into school late as it is at 7:20, and they'll be sleeping during first block just because they are teenagers and they can't come to learn at that time. But the other argument of it is that if you're pushing the school start time back, you're also pushing athletics back, and you're pushing after school activities back. So if you're spending the same amount of time on homework, the same amount of time on your after school activities, you'll end up going to bed later and getting up later. So you're really not gaining anything in a way. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
You're prolonging the day,
Yes. Yeah.
and that could impact students' participation in after school activities, which some could argue may or may not be germane to education today. All right. What is the most significant thing you think you had an impact on, Grace, while serving the one term that you did?
I think just giving overall student input. Cam said it earlier, but I really do feel like our voice was heard and was listened to, especially when you give your reasoning behind it, not just, I feel like people would like this, or I feel like people wouldn't like this. Sort of just saying, this is really happening. I know how this feels. I know that it literally takes a week, especially our freshman and sophomore year, for them to explain the grading systems, because every class was so different. You'd go from math class to math class, and it wasn't even like the same within the exact same class, just a different teacher, because it was very hard to sort of communicate between them. So I feel like just being able to have a voice for really almost anything was important while I was serving on the school board.
What about you, Cam?
One of the things that I would second that, just about speaking, but one of the other thing I would say is, I know a few months ago we had a lot of issues with the teachers' contracts. Like the teachers' union said that, the board or whatever was not negotiating with them, and that if these negotiations did not conclude, or they didn't start again, that, like, for example, teachers would not write letters of recommendation for high school students going into college. They wouldn't do extracurricular activities and clubs. They wouldn't be advisors to those. And that was an issue that really upset students in the high school, because, we're working to get involved. We're working to, explore our interests and stuff like that. And if the teachers don't have contracts, they can't really do that. So one of the things I mentioned at a board meeting was that, if we want to have this school district with great opportunities and ability for everyone to succeed at what they want to do, then we need to be promoting that, and we need to be supporting the teachers so that we can have the school system that we want.
Did either of you ever feel any undue pressure from your teachers because of the fact that you were serving as the student reps on the board?
No.
Not really. If anything, they'd come to us and just say, what do you, at least to me, they'd say, like, how do you feel about that? Or what have people been talking about? Or ask how the board meeting went. But it wasn't pressure, I'd say. It was more just encouragement and asking how we were doing, because we were sort of in the thick of it all.
For our viewers, did you have a vote on issues as a student member of the board?
You do not get to vote if you're a student member, but you do get to voice your opinions when they're doing a vote, or you can just like kind of raise your hand and maybe just say what you think, and that could have a big influence over them, or it could not. Like, for example, I know Grace and I's opinion about adding time at the beginning of the day last year, that had a big influence over how the board voted that year to add time, and so yeah.
You never participated in any executive sessions or anything like that, or just the regular board meetings, Grace?
I went to a few, but for my schedule, it was sort of hard to do that. I ended up watching a lot of them at home and doing some homework just so I could stay in the know, especially for the curriculum ones, just because a lot of the curriculum ones that they do are direct for the high school, so they'll go over curriculum, what they want to change, and personally that was one of the committees that I would watch or go over the minutes.
We have a rarity here today. The three of us are all Nashua natives, and the changing demographics, especially in both of the high schools, to see the various cultures that are there, I think adds to the quality of the education process. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Now, a little bit about you, Grace. You've already decided where you're going to college.
Yeah, I have.
Take us through the process. When did you figure that all out?
Late October, I think. I finally made up my heart and mind that I really wanted to go to Lafayette College. It was a long road. It took me a lot of time to figure out what schools I wanted to apply to, what kind of school I was looking for, what I wanted it to be, where I wanted it to be, what I wanted the program to be itself. And then it took a little bit of time talking to the admissions people and going back and talking to my family and talking to the admissions people and seeing what they would be willing to give me for money, because that mattered, what their programs were. And once they finally said that they'd give me their big scholarship and that I'd be admitted right to the programs that I really wanted, it helped to cement the feeling that I had in my head and my heart, and it all felt really right once I signed the
Biochemistry pre-med.
Yeah.
Why? How did you zero in on that?
I think from a young age, even like the age of 4, a lot of kids, they have their dream of, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a princess, and I've always wanted to be a doctor. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten into the high sciences of chem and AP biology, and that hasn't really changed. And I think that might be something that I want to spend the rest of my life doing, just because it interests me, and that's sort of what I've always wanted to do, and I haven't had a reason not to yet.
Wow. How many schools did you look at before deciding?
Before figuring out that I wanted to apply to Lafayette with ED, I was going to apply to 12, and I'd looked at 20. Yeah.
So that was 12 essays and 12 application packages?
Luckily enough, I only had to fill out 4 of them before. Yeah, a lot of them didn't have the early action, so I was like, I think that I might get in, so I postponed a lot of the bigger essays for the other schools until I knew either Lafayette was or wasn't going to work out, and once it did, I was able to save myself from writing all those essays.
So that's helped now. You've got it out of the way in October, and you can concentrate on that senior year going forward. And besides all your activities, you're involved in athletics, field hockey and lacrosse. Yeah. And one of the things we're talking about, that your information that you provided to me, Team Titan and Bluefish. That caught my eye. What's that?
Team Titan is an organization that I just joined. You actually have to apply to it. They go through I think we had a decent amount of applicants this year, and you get chosen to be on it. We're sort of involved in the pride raising of our school. So we just planned our first pep rally in a year or so. It helped to raise some money for Penguin Plunge by pieing some teachers in the face, half-court shots, just basic stuff that sort of get the whole school more happy that they go to North, because it's something that we feel that we've sort of been struggling with. Just to try to find our identity as a high school, just because we've had so many changes, principal changes, and our climate isn't as succinct as maybe South seems to be, or is when we go over there to just sort of learn about their school. So that's sort of what Team Titan's about. And Bluefish is just a subgroup of Team Titan. And we're responsible sort of for showing the freshmen around on Freshman Orientation Day, and then helping out at conferences and open houses so that parents know where the school is. So just little helpers. That's why they're called Bluefish, just from the saying one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish from
Wow, yeah.
Dr. Seuss.
That's great. Cam, what about you? Decided on college yet, or still looking?
I have not decided, but I have heard back from all my colleges. My top two right now are Stonehill College and St. Anselm's.
And what are your looking area of study?
I'm looking to do secondary education, along with either English or I think maybe a foreign language, maybe, yeah.
And throughout your 4 years at South, you've been very active in a number of things. You wrote for Panther Prince, and also was the school correspondent for the Telegraph.
Yep.
During that. All A's Academic Awards ceremony in their freshman junior year. You received the Michigan Book Award, Student Senate, Student Voice. Boy, there isn't much either of you have not done in your respective high schools, and that's a tribute to you both, because you both also have outside jobs. So you're working and you're trying to maintain your grades, obviously, because that's important, and you don't want to have that senior slump going forward. But very, very impressive vitas on both of you, and I have no reason to think that you won't be successful going forward. And you should be very proud of what you have accomplished in all of this. Is there anything we didn't touch on during your experience on the board that you'd like to talk about, or did we pretty much cover it pretty well?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for being with us here on eYe Education, and wish you well going forward. Hopefully we won't have any more snow days, so you'll get out before July 1st.
Yes.
Or they'll come up with a workable solution that works for both teachers, students, and parents, because that also has an impact at home, especially where there are younger siblings involved in some cases. So
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching eYe on Education. Our guests today have been Cam McIntyre from Nashua High School South and Grace Tomasetti from Nashua High School North. Both recently completed their time as the student representatives to the Board of Education. I'm your host, Ed Lecius. Join us again next month for eYe on Education.